Hey, sexy, and welcome to 50 Shades of Grays, the podcast where we unpack sex, relationships, and emotional chaos, all through the lens of my all-time favorite show, Grey's Anatomy. I'm your host, Crystal Rose Napolitano. I'm a certified sexologist, lifelong performer, and I'm a full-time Grey's super fan. This podcast is the love child between two of my biggest passions: deep diving and breaking down the psychology of TV characters, and giving people really easy tips and tricks to live an orgasmic life. Each episode, I break down the relational and sexual dynamics of the characters in Grey's. I teach you about what's harmful, what's hot, and what I might do if these characters were my clients. This is not a recap podcast, it's a relationship autopsy. So, unclench your jaw, roll your shoulders back, and get ready, because it's a beautiful day to save sex lives. Hello, and welcome to episode 3 of 50 Shades of Grays. I'm so excited to be back again, doing another episode, and today's episode is so great. It's only episode 2 of the show, and it's already so incisive and direct, and Shonda Rhimes said we're going to talk about all of these things in episode 2, and I love it. It feels especially, delicious and wonderful and powerful because I am recording this episode on International Women's Day, March 8th, 2026. I just got back from doing a International Women's Day protest and then a march where I live here in Southern France, and it feels incredible. I just feel so pumped, full of incredible solidarity and sisterhood. And there were lots of people of all genders there. It was really powerful and amazing. But it felt like such a great, way to fill my cup before I come record this episode, because this show is such a feminist show, such an intersectional feminist show. And it's one of the reasons I really love it. So I can't wait to dive in to episode 2 of Grey's Anatomy, episode 3 of this podcast. So let's dive in. So in the last episode of this podcast, we talked about boundaries and how important they are and how we should honor them. And in this episode, we're actually going to talk about boundaries again, but we're going to talk about the types of boundaries that keep people out. Those boundaries we've learned in hyper individualism and being an overperformer and always having to rely on ourselves. And we start building walls to keep people out. So by the end of this episode, you're going to know how to define a boundary. Is this a consent boundary where it's like, this is a no for me? Or is this a boundary where I'm actually blocking intimacy, right? Is this a boundary that will make me connective? Or is this a boundary that I chose because I'm being protective? So by the end of this episode, you'll have a tool to start deciphering that for yourself. And I'm so excited to get there with you. So let's go into this episode. So episode 2, season 1 of Grey's Anatomy, the air date was April 3rd, 2005. It was actually 1 week after the pilot. As we know, every episode of Grey's Anatomy, except for one, is named after a song. And this one was named The First Cut is the Deepest by the song by Cat Stevens. It has been covered by a lot of other artists. Potentially most famously Sheryl Crow. Okay, so let's go into the fun facts. So this is actually the first episode where we see the title sequence. I love the title sequence. It's so quintessentially early 2000s, like drama, romance. We see just like flashes of like drinking a martini, someone putting on mascara. It finishes with 2 people laying in a hospital bed, but their feet are like kind of rubbing on each other. And we hear the famous song that we know as the Grey's Anatomy theme song. It's called Cozy in the Rocket by a group called Psapp. It's spelled P-S-A-P-P. So something really kind of quirky and funny about this theme song, it is done in a musical style called toytronica, which is a musical style that's literally made and composed by using children's toys. And when I read this, when I was doing research for this episode, it made so much sense to me because that famous like do 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 do, it sounds like a children's toy because it is. So I really loved that. And there's like a parallel that we see here that's like all of these adults in this hospital, like having these adult relationships, but oftentimes acting like children. I really love the through line there. So I love that fun fact. It's composed out of children's toys. Like, who knew? So fun fact number 2, in this episode, Meredith is putting up a sign on the hospital bulletin board to ask for roommates. And there's a little Easter egg put in there, and it says, no Bush supporters need apply. And I love that because it's like Shonda Rhimes is just like, hey, this is like, we're episode 2, we're setting the tone, here we go. And yeah, you can like look it up online, the roommate sign, and it'll say like something like no smokers, no this, no that, and no Bush supporters need apply. Fun fact number 3, this episode has a bunch of firsts that are kind of through lines throughout much of the series. So this episode is the first time we see Meredith and Derek kiss. It's the first time we hear Derek say he loves ferry boats. That comes through the series a lot. It's like his favorite thing. I won't give any spoilers unless you're watching the show along with us, but it is a big through line in Derek's character. And it's the first time we hear Derek called McDreamy. Christina says it to Meredith. They're both sitting kind of in the hospital lobby, and she says something like, oh, you're getting it on with Dr. McDreamy. So obviously that nickname became very famous around Patrick Dempsey's character of Derek Shepherd, and this is the first time we hear it. So now it's time for the geek out section of the podcast where I share my favorite moments from the episode. This episode is just, it's so rich. It's got so much in it that I might have to name a few. So the first one I really love is the elevator kiss. Like Meredith is telling him, I'll go into it more in a minute, but Meredith is telling him like, I'm not going to date you. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do that. And then he turns around and looks at her, and they have this incredibly sexy kiss. Like making out in the elevator is like a thing in Grey's Anatomy. Like so much drama goes down in the elevators of the hospital. And this is the first time we see that. And the kiss is just so fucking hot. And they're like slammed against the wall and they're grabbing. And like, we've all had a kiss like that. And it's so incredible. So I love that moment. She drops all of the files that she's holding, and then the elevator doors open, and she like brushes her hair, like really quickly fixes it and gathers them all up and walks away. Right. And it's this like super hot moment. So my other favorite, it's not one moment, but it's just an entire kind of storyline in this episode. So in this episode, we see actually a rape victim being brought into the hospital, and they're doing operations on her. And in the OR, they take something out of her stomach, and they're like, what is this? And Meredith says, oh my God, she bit it off. And then they all look at her, and she goes, well, that's his penis. And so they give it to her in an ice box, and then she becomes like in charge of this penis because it's police evidence. So she has to carry around a severed penis throughout most of this episode. And I absolutely love it. Like she starts talking about it like it's a character. She's like, I have to babysit the penis. I can't do anything because of the penis. I have custody of the penis. What am I supposed to do with the penis? And it's just such a beautiful writing choice to put in this episode about a rapist. And for a woman to carry the severed penis around. And it's incredible. It's quirky. It's a great choice. I love this moment. And my last geek out moment, something I love that when I watch it, I just get so, honestly, like it's so hot to me, this moment. So they catch the rapist. The rapist actually turns himself in. He comes to the hospital because obviously his penis was cut off, and he comes to the hospital. He drives himself there. He faints because of blood loss. They do an operation on him. And then he's like handcuffed to the bed. Later, he wakes up from surgery, and Derek Shepherd walks into his room, like slams the door open, and the rapist is asleep, and he slams the bottom of the bed to wake him up. And it is so fucking hot masculinity where he's just like, get up. Like he's just bringing in this, like, you're not going to fucking sleep on my watch. Right. So he looks at him and says, the good news is Dr. Bailey stopped you bleeding. The bad news is we're giving your penis to the cops. Have a nice life. I love it. It's so good. It's like on International Women's Day, I'm like talking about this, and I feel just so like this is the response men need to have always when there's a joke about rape, when there's like when they know where their friend is cheating on their wife, their friend is cheating on their girlfriend, like whatever is happening, when they see any mistreatment of women, men need to be meeting it with this level of intolerance. Right? And it's so satisfying to see it on screen. It's so satisfying to watch Derek Shepherd come into this hospital room like, no, you're not, like, I'm going to intimidate the fuck out of you, right? So those are my three geek out moments. I think it's so beautiful. And thank you, Shonda Rhimes, for writing this episode. Okay, now let's set the scene. So this episode, like I said, is about Meredith drawing so many lines that nobody can get close to her. And she's starting to show in this episode that she's a classic avoidant, right? She's classically overly self-reliant. She's an overperformer. She kind of moves to the world like, I don't need people. And I love always like what Meredith comes in the beginning sequence of every episode. And I think what she says in the beginning of this episode is so important. I want to read it in this podcast episode. So the episode opens and Meredith says, quote, "It's all about lines. The finish line at the end of residency, waiting in line for a chance at the operating table. And then there's the most important line, a line separating you from the people you work with. It doesn't help to get too familiar to make friends. You need boundaries between you and the rest of the world. Other people are far too messy. It's all about lines, drawing lines in the sand and praying like hell nobody crosses them." Okay. It's so indicative of what type of person Meredith Grey is here, right? This is not someone who's saying, gosh, I'm going to be in this residency 100 hours a week. I really hope I meet the right people that are going to support me in the right way so that I can rely on them through residency and they can rely on me. She's not saying that. She's literally like, other people are far too messy, right? And so for anybody who has watched Grey's Anatomy, we know that like her parents are extremely messy people, right? Her mom didn't have time or space for her. Her dad was pretty absent. And Meredith learned really early that other people are too messy and she has to become really self-reliant, right? And this shows up again later when she puts up this roommate ad and the characters of Izzy and George, who are in her kind of cohort in the residency, say, let us move in, let us move in. And she says, we're with each other 100 hours a week. You want to live together too, right? And I don't disagree with Meredith. I might not want to also live with people that I spend 100 hours a week with. However, this is just hammering on that point of that this character doesn't want anyone to really get too intimate with her. She's like, I've had enough of you. This is my limit, right? But we're getting to that point again where it's like she's creating such boundaries and becoming so over reliant on herself that she won't even get closer to people who are in her cohort. And even in the elevator scene, it starts by Meredith putting up a boundary. She says, like, Dr. Shepherd walks into the elevator and she says, I'm not going out with you. And he says, did I ask you to go out with me? And she says, I'm not dating you again and I'm not sleeping with you. You're my boss. And she literally says, echoing, the voiceover at the start of the episode, I'm drawing a line. The line is drawn. There's a big line, right? She says it so blatantly. Right here, there's a line. It's not going to be crossed, right? And so then Derek turns around and he said, so is this line imaginary or do I need to get you a marker? Which is so like, my response to that is like, I get like, I don't know, cute angry when people are like you're so cute, but it's still kind of pissing me off. Like that's my response there. But it's just showing more, that Meredith is like trying to create lines from things that might feel good. And then she like is negotiating these boundaries throughout this episode, right? Because she said, after Derek says, do I need to get you a marker? She looks at him, throws the files down, and they have that incredible kiss, right? So it's just it's so repetitive. This lesson we're learning about Meredith is she's like, nope, I don't need you. This isn't happening. Oh, wait, maybe it is. All right, let's move into sexology mode. So this is the part where I tell you what's hot and what's harmful. But let's start with the shadow, like what's going on underneath the surface. So like I said, Meredith is a classic avoidant, right? This over individualism, this like rejection of closeness, this rejection of intimacy. And it's always kind of like perceived and projected in our society as a form of strength. And I want to push back and say it's actually not, it's survival, right? We've arrived at this time in history where we're super disconnected from each other. I'm not saying anything new to anybody listening, but we're so disconnected from each other, and we are literally built to be in connection. We're built to be interdependent. And so that means a healthy relationship of reliance on self, but reliance on other. And Meredith doesn't know how to do that in the beginning of the show. She came like with all of this pressure. Her mom is this famous surgeon. She's been surviving. She maybe has to get to this level of, excellence. She arrives in Seattle at her mom's house. And at first, she even rejects the house in the first episode. I'm selling it. I just moved in and I'm going to sell it. Right. And so she's like always having to survive to get to the next thing with all of this pressure. And basically, she learns that needing people leads to disappointment. Right. And so many of us have learned that lesson, right? I am feeling it in my body right now as I'm even saying it. Like, how many times have people disappointed us and we felt dropped or abandoned, right? But that doesn't mean we stop having the need for other people. So, what's going on underneath the surface for Meredith is just this over self-reliance, this avoidance, this I'm going to make sure that I'm okay and I'm going to make sure nobody else has to prop me up because I'm all I can count on. And again, I want to reiterate, this has been romanticized, but it is not healthy. We don't want to function like this in the world. We need people, we need healthy relationships. So that's the shadow for Meredith. Okay, let's go into what's hot and what's harmful. So what's hot is the elevator kiss. It's so hot. It's just like ridiculously sexy, this scene. It's meant to be, it works, it's good TV, right? So we have this incredibly hot moment where Meredith kind of leans into her desire, right? And it's a really good example of how we can set limits to protect ourselves, but that doesn't mean our desire stops, right? That doesn't mean anything really. It just means that we're like creating a bubble around ourselves. So her desire like pushes through her own boundaries, and it's so incredibly beautiful. Like, go watch it. Go watch episode 2. There's just like face grabbing and wall pressing and all of this amazing stuff. It's so hot. Like, their desire for each other is so sexy in this episode. And what's harmful for Meredith internally is that she actually only let herself feel this kiss and feel this desire for like a few seconds, right? She leans into the kiss, she enjoys it, she lets herself be close to Derek, and then immediately shuts off and literally runs out of the elevator, right? And so what is harmful about that is that she's like constantly like pushing herself in and pulling herself out. Like, I don't want to date you. I don't want to date you. Okay, let's make out. Okay, I'm going to run away. Right. So it's this internal dialogue that's always like unsettled with herself in this episode where it's like, I need roommates. I don't want you guys. I want to create this boundary with Derek. No, I want to make out. No, I'm going to run away. Right. It's just this like constant hot and cold. And that's harmful, right? But she's working it out. She's learning as the show goes on. But this dynamic of I'm going to create a boundary and then I'm going to break it. And then I'm going to create a boundary and then I'm going to break it is harmful to our nervous systems, to our self-trust. And it's something to look out for. Okay, let's talk about the political and cultural influences at play in this episode. So a dynamic I haven't talked about yet, there's a beautiful storyline, a beautifully tragic storyline in this episode where a Chinese woman comes into the ER, she's got a cut, and the character of Izzy Stevens repairs it for her. And this woman keeps trying to speak Chinese to her and tell her, hey, she's clearly trying to show her that something is wrong, but Izzy doesn't speak Chinese, right? So eventually this woman gets Izzy outside, and there's another woman outside hiding behind the trash cans with a big like cut in her forehead. And Izzy says, oh my goodness, you're hurt. Let me get you inside. Let me get you inside. And both women resist and they say, no, 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 we can't bring her inside. And she says eventually something like, I don't have papers. And Izzy says, well, she came inside. And the woman says she has a green card. I don't have a green card. And if I go inside, I'm going to go to jail. And I just want to like let that hang in the air for a second. That this episode aired 21 years ago. 21 years ago. And it literally is still happening People are still dealing with this. I can't go to the hospital because the police might be called on me because I don't have the appropriate documentation. This is not okay. And I am so just like endlessly grateful to this show for putting these themes out there in such a profound way, right? This woman has a huge gash in her forehead. And we know that the character of Izzy Stevens helping her, she's putting her job at risk. She could be in a lot of trouble for treating someone like off the record outside. And so when Izzy gets it, she says, okay, wait. She goes inside, essentially steals medical supplies and comes out and patches this woman up. And she says, I need to see you back here in 5 days to check the wound. Here is my cell phone number. Come back in 5 days. Right. And this is a doctor risking her career just to give somebody medical care. And that's a huge deal. Right. And like this whole episode is about lines. Literally, like there's a line that this undocumented person cannot cross to get the medical care that she needs. And she stays behind a dumpster where she feels more safe and she needs medical care. This gash in the show is really, really big across her forehead, right? And she can't go in. And so it's gorgeous because the writing, these are Chinese immigrants in the show, and the writing shows that the white person has to leave the place of privilege to cross the line of privilege and to come help the immigrants where it's more dangerous, right? It's such brilliant writing. It's a maddening thing that is still happening. And it's a beautiful, like, other iteration of the theme of this episode of lines drawn. And then the other kind of cultural, unfortunately, gender dynamic at play here is the rape victim and the rapist. So we have this rape victim that is admitted into the hospital. They find the severed penis in her stomach. And then the rapist comes to the hospital and admits himself because of blood loss. And there's this incredible scene in the OR, and 3 women are standing around Christina, Meredith, and Dr. Bailey. And Dr. Bailey says, like, why can't we sew on the penis? And they say, well, we can't because the teeth that severed it off didn't make a clean cut. And so it can't be sewn back on. And Dr. Bailey says, oh, and they say also the digestive juices while it was in her stomach ruined all the tissue, and that he'll have to pee out of a bag for the rest of his life or for a long time. And he can't have sex for the rest of his life. And these 3 women are standing in the OR, and this rapist is on the table. This white man and a black woman who is the surgeon, Dr. Bailey, is sewing him up. And 3 women look around and go, how sad. He won't be able to have sex for the rest of his life. And I love that, as I said, Meredith carries around the severed penis in the whole episode. And it's incredible. Like, a woman is carrying around a man's severed penis throughout the entire episode. And he ends up, like, it goes to the police, right? And it's so like another triumph of the writing. I guess this is another geek out moment in this podcast episode, but to show that women in that moment in that OR and carrying around that penis have the power over someone who took power away from a different woman is so healing and beautiful and wonderful, because we're in a time right now where so much is happening, where women's voices are saying this happened, and this happened. And the men around us are not protecting us. They're not standing with us. They're not pushing our voices forward, right? And so to see this on TV it's so wonderfully healing, and it just keeps me coming back to this show. And if you aren't a Grey's Anatomy listener, I hope that this podcast will help you maybe like fall in love a little bit with the show, or at least make you a little like curious about what's going on, because these themes and what happens in the show is so beautiful. All right, let's move into the work. So the work is like the emotional work that we can all do as we move through Grey's Anatomy and all the things we can learn about relationships. So the first part is desire. So what we learn about desire in this episode is that desire doesn't care about the lines we draw, right? Have you ever had a crush on somebody and you have been like, I can't date them or I can't be with them because of this reason, right? That doesn't make your desire stop. In fact, it probably makes it like way more rampant, right? It makes it way more intense. So you can create a boundary and your desire can betray you, right? And so we can learn about that. Like desire isn't always indicative of like our highest choices, but it can be a very powerful force. So the question isn't really like whether or not you feel desire. It's kind of more what you choose to do with your desire. So a practice I have in my own life is if I feel an intense feeling, I try to never make a decision from any intense feeling, right? Because your nervous system is heightened. You've got all these chemicals moving through you. And I try to never make a decision from this like heightened place. However, what I do is I always choose from my values. I basically ask myself the question, what kind of person am I trying to be? What kind of relationship am I trying to make? How would my ideal self like behave in this situation? And I choose that. And that has really gotten me into like a really good rhythm and kept me really close to my intuition, even when my desire is like pew, pew, pew. And what we can learn about attachment in this episode, as I've said, is Meredith is a classic avoidant. So she's constantly just creating distance, putting walls up, keeping people at arm's length. And that's not going to really help her be her true self. Actually, throughout this episode, we kind of see her soften. We see people really like get close to her and her like take one brick down out of the wall and get a little more vulnerable and get a little more this. And so her attachment softens because we don't heal in a vacuum, right? We heal in relationship and while doing the self work, but we can't heal on our own and heal all of our relational wounds unless we are practicing them within relationship. And so it's really beautiful to see Meredith let Izzy and George in and say, okay, she eventually says at the end of the episode, okay, you guys can move in. And she softens. And Izzy says, I can't believe you caved. And Meredith says, yeah, I can't believe I caved. And it's beautiful. It's like we see this person who's never been able to rely on anyone go, okay, I'm going to let the door open and you guys can come in. And then what we can learn about communication is, as we've said, Meredith is so self-reliant and so kind of isolated. In a really beautiful scene towards the end of the episode, she's in a room with another doctor, and the doctor had gotten something wrong, and Meredith and her having this moment, and the doctor said, "Are you?" And Meredith says, "I'm scared 100% of the time." And it's so vulnerable and it's so sweet. And it's this moment of like further softening for the character and her letting someone in, her saying, yeah, I'm terrified. And they have this moment of connection through it. And there's like a crack forming in her wall because vulnerability isn't weakness, right? It's the first step towards real intimacy. And we see this here for the character. It's so well done. All right, now it's time for the mini coaching session. So I'm going to give a little coaching session to Meredith and Derek about what I've seen in this episode. If they were my clients and they were sitting on my couch in my office, this is what I would say to them. So if Meredith was on my couch, I would level with her as a woman and I would say, Meredith, I see you. I see how hard you're working. I see how you're trying to hold it all together and just like feel nothing and be numb. And I want you to know that's incredibly exhausting. I want you to know that you will burn out, that you need other people. And the independence you're creating for yourself is not freedom. It's actually a cage because once you run out of energy, there's nothing left. You need people to support you. And letting George and Izzy move in isn't weakness. It's actually the bravest thing you've done in a really long time to let people get close to you and in your personal space and people who want to support you and love you and are genuinely good people. And maybe it's okay that it's messy. Maybe it's okay. And maybe you let it be messy for a while and let like your grip go just a little bit because you were made for connection and you were made for relationships even if you haven't learned that yet. And then if Derek was on my couch, what I would say is, okay, Derek, the marker joke was cute in the elevator. That was cute. It's part of your charm, right? But she told you where the line was and you turned it into a punchline. You made fun of it again. Again, you made fun of her putting up a boundary. And you need to pay attention to what she is saying. You need to pay attention to like her cues and the boundaries she's trying to put up and make it easy for her to be able to say, hey, this is not good for me. This woman is terrified most of the time. And if you are going to ask her to take a risk on you, you need to be worth the risk. And the way that you can be worth the risk is to be a person that's safe to say no to, even if it's her overprotective mechanism coming forward. You need to honor her no and make it safe and make it a big deal that she felt like she could tell you no and that you are a trustworthy person. Be worth the risk. Okay, so here's my little hot tip for you that you can take into your week to practice to see how you can like better your relationships based on what we've talked about here today. I want you to kind of flip it and notice, like, are the boundaries I'm creating actually keeping people out, or are they there to help keep me safe? There's a difference between a boundary that keeps you safe and a wall that keeps you lonely. So notice when you're saying no to things, do you feel safer and more connected afterwards? Or do you feel more isolated? You don't have to tear down any walls, any boundaries. Just start to notice as a practice throughout your week. And a way you can put this into practice is this week, just let yourself get like 1 inch closer to somebody in a way that you might not normally do. And it doesn't have to be big, but something to just stretch you a tiny bit. Maybe instead of leaving a text message on read, write that person a really thoughtful response and tell them what you're going through. Maybe something like, I normally would let this sit because I'm so overwhelmed lately, but I just want you to know you're really important to me. And it was important to me to let you know that today. Something really tiny, just to stretch that muscle of isolation a little bit more towards connection. You could say yes to a plan you thought you were going to cancel, tell someone one true thing about how you're feeling, and you're just taking one brick out of the wall. It doesn't have to be big. And remember, vulnerability is uncomfortable. It's really uncomfortable. And that's kind of the point. And it's really important for us to get to know the mechanism within ourselves that either says, this is a no for me because it's unsafe and I do not consent, or this is a no because it feels new and I'm scared I might get hurt. And I would invite you to just play with that one a little bit, right? I would invite you to notice, which ways am I keeping people out? And in the body, what this might feel like, the difference between the two, what this could feel like, your body, you have to determine what it feels like for you, but I'll give you some examples. The first one is when it's a complete no, it'll feel like a stop sign in your body. You might feel your body come to a stop, your stomach drop, all of your muscles tighten, and all desire go away, right? It might just feel like this contraction of muscles everywhere. And when we create a boundary that just isolates us, it might feel like a bit of discomfort, like we're saying, no, I can't do that. But there might be a bit of curiosity behind it. It might be like, but what would it feel like if I did? Right? But what if it actually might feel really good? And there might be a little bit of like this pulling or stretching in the body, right? So this week, I'm going to invite you to just notice, when am I saying no and why am I saying no? And it's just that kind of like coming back to what we want and what kind of relationships we want in our life and saying, are these decisions getting me closer to that? And as we notice, we start to notice the patterns, and that gives us a lot of great information on who we are, how we're functioning in relationships, and if we're putting protective boundaries up instead of connective boundaries up. And to round out this episode, I want to read you the voiceover that Meredith says at the end. She says, at some point, you have to make a decision. Boundaries don't keep other people out, they fence you in. Life is messy. That's how we were made. So you can waste your life drawing lines, or you can live your life crossing them. Because there are some lines that are way too dangerous to cross. Here's how I see it. If you're willing to take the chance, the view from the other side is spectacular. Beautiful. I don't know if I have any follow-up. Meredith Grey said it all. And I just want to thank you so much for listening to this episode. Keep this in mind throughout your week. Is this boundary being protective or is it being connective? And I am so thrilled that you're a listener, and I can't wait to have you on the next episode of 50 Shades of Grays. And if you haven't seen an episode of Grey's Anatomy in a while, I do recommend this one. It is so rich and so full of amazing stuff. And happy International Women's Day. And if you want to do something really special for the women in your life, this is my little tip for you. Go find a woman in your life and ask her, what do you love about being a woman? And take in her smile, the magic, the way her eyes light up when she thinks of her response. I promise it'll be a little like glimmer of magic for you. And as she shares with you, listen. Don't listen to respond, listen to really hear. And then when she tells you, celebrate her. Be the safest person you can be for her in her life, so that all of her lines that she has drawn for protection, because women have to draw them constantly, that those lines might be able to soften with you. Be the safest person you can for the women in your life today, and tell them Happy International Women's Day and why you're grateful for them, and just watch their lines that they've drawn soften. So thank you again so much for listening, and I will see you on the next episode of 50 Shades of Grays. I love you, you messy human. Thank you so much for listening to 50 Shades of Grays. You can find me on Substack and all social media platforms at The Honest Sexologist. Don't forget to grab my free couples connection guide to help you start reconnecting to your partner tonight in less than 10 minutes. Be gentle with yourself, honor your desires, and remember, chemistry is not the same thing as connection. Until next time, I love you, you messy human.